Two guys and a mic. That's with the number two. Okay, because I know there's some confusion now that we're everywhere, Mark. We're on Spotify, we're on Pandora, we're on not only YouTube where it originates, we're on Apple Podcast and
But I sent you some screenshots. There are a lot of two guys on the mic. We may have to consider changing this somehow because people that are scrolling don't know what the hell we're talking about. So I think we either got to plug the word music or records or sex in there to get a lot of views.
We could put entertainment in there.
It's
music entertainment.
But because I actually went on Chat GPT and asked for names of podcasts, and they came up with some funny ones, which I'll tell you about. So,
well, that's the problem. You went to JPT when it's really GPT.
GPT, whatever it is, but they came up with some good suggestions. So, I mean, I think that might help us grow our audience because if two guys on a mic and people say, well, you each have a mic and all that other nonsense.
Oh, I know.
I mean, people that are scrolling don't know the intensity and the subject matter of which we discuss here.
We might have to do that. Anyway, please like, subscribe, and because it costs nothing to subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you know when we're putting up new episodes. We have another guest, and we're not even going to be in music today. It's going to be completely different from music.
We're branching
out. A friend of mine, he's a Long Island guy, so we're both, originally Long Island guys. And he is, his name is Joe Barberia. Welcome, Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Good to be here. Pleasure being here.
Last time I saw Joe was not maybe 3 weeks ago, and he was clean shaven. Now he's got almost a full beard in. It's pretty good.
Well,
pretty good.
After 30 years, every day of shaving and trying to keep clean, because that's what it was when you were there. You just, you were clean shaven every day.
But you get frustrated like me that it'll grow here, but it won't grow on top of your head, right?
Well, I'm having that issue there, so I don't understand the follicle issue, but they have an issue with navigation because apparently they ain't navigating to areas which I like.
So Joe, Mark, if you didn't know, spent 30 plus years as an air traffic controller for New York Center, which is probably the busiest facility for air traffic control, at least in this country. I don't know about the world, but definitely in this country.
So, Joe, the first question obviously was, were you working on 9/11?
No, I actually, all my friends were, but I worked at midnight. So I got off at 7 o'clock. I went home. I took a nap, and I got woken up by a friend that was working with me on the mid and said, "You got the news?" And I put on the news. And so to answer your question, no, I was working at midnight. But a lot of my friends worked that shift, and it was something to etch in your memory forever. But no, answer your question, no.
Did they call you in, or did you? Because then they grounded all the air traffic, right? Yeah, so there was nothing flying.
If you saw that video, 9/11, it was remarkable how how we got all those aircraft, out of the air and on the ground in such a little time. But yeah, after that, everything was in a ground stop, and it was, everything went to a halt. So was I asked to come in? Yeah, a couple, we were eventually. But then it was like, they had minimum staffing at the time because there was nobody there. Nobody, don't get me wrong, there was people there, but there was just no participants to control. So
you actually had to show up to work even though there was no planes.
Oh yeah, no, you had to show up for work even with even during COVID. We'll probably get into that a little later, but you had to show up. There was
how crazy was that for you to look at the screen that was normally filled with airplanes and not see anything?
Well, it was surreal. If you saw, there's a video out there that's crazy. It's called 9/11. And they actually have like a timeline, and they speed it up, and they show from the time that the aircrafts hit till the time that they called it ATC 0, and that no aircraft is in the air, and nothing's going above. Everybody where you are, go back where you came from. So it was pretty surreal. It wasn't something that I ever saw before, but crazy.
So let's go back, if you don't mind, Mark, and I'll ask Joe, how did you get started or interested in actually, pursuing that career?
And how do you do it?
Yeah.
Well, if you asked a couple of people, you wouldn't realize that. Like they can't believe I did it, but I did. I did get through it. But it started with just loving aviation. I mean, my father was a private pilot, so he was like he wanted me to do. If I was into it, he was into it. So just becoming a private pilot, and then wanting to be a pilot, and then for actually start, I wanted to be a mechanic. So I guess to answer your question, I just loved aviation. I just was around aviation my whole life. What got me into air traffic was it was a situation in Pan American. They had an issue with the bombing and they went under. And I was working with Pan American. I was like, they're firing everybody. So it just happened my dad knew some people at air traffic in New York Center. And they were like, just tell them to take a test and come work for me. You could always fly, which that's what I've been doing. I privately fly, but that changed my life forever. That Pan American crash, but unfortunately, but
That was the Lockerbie.
yeah, it was it was crazy.
There's a movie coming out about that, or
there's an old movie on it about the security, how we've come a long way with security. Like, when you go to the airport now and they want you to check this, check that, take off your belt, take off your shoes, you just do it, because it's like, if you look through history, we've come a long way. They were letting people in with shoe bombs, if you remember, but yeah.
Mark had a career in aviation too, for a little while before the music business.
I think you told me, but I can't remember the exact,
I mean, you talk about security. It's pretty funny. Back in the day, my friend Billy got me a job at American Airlines that had a security company called Security 76. There was zero training involved, okay? So it's before 9/11, where he would check your bags when you came off the plane. But when the guys upstairs on the machines went on break, they would just send us up and we just watch bags go through the conveyor belt. And we had no training. So, I mean, if anything looked funny or obvious, and I think I might have shared some of the stories that we'd see in people's bags, but I mean, you think about it. I mean, back then there was zero security. My friends and I would go on the computers at the gate. We'd get all the names of the passengers that were coming in. We'd see all the celebrities. I saw, people like Gerald Ford. We saw Spiro Agnew, and then we saw all the rock stars and artists. And American Airlines was all about, having celebrities. So sometimes they would have us go to the gate and escort these people through, but it certainly was not the intensity that you probably had to deal with staring at a screen all day. And how does that work? Now, you say New York Central. Where is New York Central? Is that an airport?
Not, it's called New York Center. There's different centers. There's centers all over the United States. There's at least maybe 26 centers. So centers and towers and approach controls, they all have the same thing. They're separating traffic, but they have different, job tasks. I always look at it as an upside down wedding cake. You ever see a 3-tier wedding cake?
Interesting.
So if you turned it upside down, and the small tier would be the tower and the ground control. And as you
at the airport,
that's what I thought.
Excuse me. So your airport, and then as you start to climb, I'm just going to use just numbers, but if you went above, say, 5,000 feet, you would go to the approach and departure control. And then if you went above, like, say, 12 to 17,000, you would get into the center environment. So as you increased in altitude or decreased, you would go through these layers of control.
Interesting.
So the centers would handle mostly high-level aircraft. The approach controls would sequence them into the towers so they could be managed, a little bit easily than just having, a meatball of aircraft coming at you at one time. So, and then the towers bring you down to the ground, and the ground brings you to your terminal. So
let me ask you, or as they would say in Brooklyn, X. Last week I flew in to Kennedy. So as we're coming in, we actually came in over Jones Beach. You can't miss that. If you're familiar with Long Island, you know Jones Beach. That's no longer center at that point, it's approach? Because I could clearly see Jones Beach, so I don't know how high in the air we were.
No, the when you start getting into like, say, like New York Center is kind of like there's so many major airports within a close proximity. So the approach control will probably, you start getting prepared, 20 to 10 miles out before they hand you over to the towers.
Mm.
So even though they might not handle that far out, towers handle like 5 miles out, um, but they'll hand you off a little bit earlier, and then they'll start, they'll start sequencing into the towers. And usually it's, like, I don't know, 40, 50 aircraft per minute or something like that. It's pretty
Holy
crazy.
moly.
But everyone operates on a separate frequency, right? So if they come to you, if you turn them over to approach or well, not departure, but you turn them over to approach as they're coming in, they go to a different frequency.
Oh yeah. There's each piece of the pie has their own frequency. So that's the nutshell of air traffic control. It's like, no matter what that piece of pie is, you have your own frequency.
Can you explain though? Because we've probably all seen it or at least heard it. When you guys are talking to aircraft, there is a code that you use, right? For identifying the aircraft, or
Yeah, the identifying is the 3-letter ID, like Delta, DAL, stuff like that. So whatever is on the screen is going to tell you the information. Is that what you're asking? Like what
yeah, it's like DEL 2554. Make a I don't know, make a descent to 8,000 feet in contact approach, whatever it is. There is a cadence to how you do each.
What I
message,
believe
right?
you're asking is that the towers, the approach, the centers, they all get information prior to it even coming into your airspace. Years ago, there used to be paper strips. So you had this little paper strip that got spit out by what's it called again? A printer.
A printer.
And they would come out in like small little like forms, and then you would put them in a strip. And anyway, getting back to it had all the data, where it was coming from, the altitude that it wants, the airspeed that it wants, it's requesting, the destination and the route of flight. So no matter where you're going, that air traffic controller or ground controller or tower or center or approach is going to have that information in front of them prior to even entering the airspace, and they call it a pop-up. And but most of these aircraft are scheduled, most of them, and then they have the information prior to even them talking to them.
So back up for a minute. So let's say you were there on 9/11. What part of the wedding cake, as you said, is the first part that sees that this plane is not, on schedule?
Doing what it should.
Right. It should be going. And then does it go to the second?
Well, 9/11 was kind of unique. You had two from Boston. Was it Newark? Was it Newark, and then one from Washington. And they first came out, like, if you're talking that the ones that came out of, like, say, let me see, what was the other one that I had here?
Didn't one come from Boston, maybe?
You had
the
two
first plane
coming
was from Boston,
You had one coming from Washington, one coming from Newark. So, say if the ones from Boston, they went through multiple air traffic. They went from the tower to the approach, to the departure, to the center, and then it got transferred from Boston Center to New York Center. And then
when he went off the screen or wasn't responding.
Right. So once it goes, like years ago when there used to be what do you call it? When people took over your aircraft,
Hijacking.
When you get hijacking, it was kind of like okay, we have a hijack. The pilot's going to put a special code in. The code will get automatically transferred, and then you would say, verify you're squawking this code, like verify that you're being hijacked. Wow. And if they didn't say anything, then we just separate them from other aircraft. But now it seems like we're in a whole new improved hijacking, So it's not like so. What they did was they stopped communicating, which is no radio communications. Wow. So all we're doing is separating aircraft from them.
Right.
But they went kind of nuts. But I'm not sure if I answered any of your questions, but they did went through a couple controllers, and then they just went rogue. They just made like a quick 180. So it was like it took the tower. I mean, excuse me, all the controls off guard. Like, what? This is not just someone losing a radio. This is something wrong.
Right.
So,
but in your opinion, was there too much of a delay where people I guess people were caught off guard because prior to that, hijackings were like, well, they're going to fly them somewhere and then demand some kind of ransom. Nobody ever had seen what ended up happening prior.
Well, you can only do so much with the hijacked aircraft. Really, it's comply with what they want.
Right.
Give them navigation. They say, like, what's your intentions? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
But we weren't talking to these guys.
Nobody was talking. They decided they had a plan, and their plan was to go from A to B, and B was a target, and that was it. They didn't want to communicate. They just wanted to navigate.
Right.
They wanted to navigate in the most hostile, way. So they really didn't communicate at all. So, and that's even more frustrating for a controller because you're like,
because you don't know what's going on.
They really didn't. If you saw, they actually did a movie on that. It was pretty, accurate. They just you're off guard. What you do, you get an aircraft that's hijacked. You go, okay, it's hijacked. Supervisor. Then the supervisor makes all kinds of phone calls, and then we track them. And then hopefully he goes down on the ground and he gets satisfied. But these people were never going to get satisfied until they accomplish their goal.
Now, the other question that popped into my head was, so you would get these strips. Well, eventually they originally started strips of paper, and then they became more electronic. But it had requested altitude, requested speed, requested direction. But did you ever get pushback? Real pushback from pilots if you wanted to change them and they weren't happy?
Of course you do. They're human. They got things they want to achieve. They want to achieve fuels. They especially want to fuel and time. So when you're giving them a wacky vector all around the Pennsylvania or wherever you're being controlled, they're not too happy. So they, of course you're going to get some feedback, and you just, you tell them as nice as you can with what you're intending to do. And they really have to comply. Really, if the pilot says, I'm not doing it, he's piloting command. He's just going to go off, and then then after that, it creates a problem. Then he did something that wasn't a control maneuver, and he could probably get in trouble. But he is going to have to prove why he went against air traffic control.
So let's say,
same thing with us. We'd have to prove why we wanted him to go that way. So,
let's say, for instance, you got a bunch of planes coming into New York Center space from wherever, right? And all of a sudden, there's a problem at Kennedy Airport. Okay. So approach and the tower obviously reach you guys. We have to start stacking up planes and prioritizing who lands. Is it you guys go into a set pattern? Do you figure out or do you know who's going to be low on fuel and needs to actually get down?
No, well, it's up to the pilot to tell if their fuel, if they need fuel, if they have a fuel problem. If they're declaring a fuel minimum situation, it's up to them to tell. But, if one airport's affected, it affects most of the airports that are involved. Because if you change a runway configuration, everybody gets changed. It's not just because if you change LaGuardia's approach control. I'm probably going off on a tangent. But,
no, makes sense.
If you change somebody and you put somebody in a hold, or if you change a runway configuration, it changes not only LaGuardia, it changes Teterboro, it changes Newark, it changes Kennedy, it changes even sometimes Islip. It changes.
Who makes that decision, Daly? Because they land differently and take off differently based on which way the wind's blowing.
Well, the tower is the one that's saying, "Hey, listen, the the winds are favoring this one right now. So then the approach control, then it goes to the approach, because the approach is the one that sequences them and gets them in a much more tighter environment.
Right.
So it would go the towers, and then the approach control would probably make that call, and then it goes back to the centers, and then the centers would, change their, their plan of action also. But mostly the towers and the approach control make that call.
So go ahead, Mark.
So when you're communicating with the UFOs and the aliens, how does that work in terms of priority landing and takeoffs?
Well, they're considered no radio contact, so you handle them just like that.
No, but seriously, have you ever seen anything that's out of the ordinary or something you can't identify? Or you sworn to secrecy for government?
No, it's not that, because if there's something that's seen, it's told immediately to the supervisors. Nothing is kept secret, but if we see something that it's like there's a, intruder, we call it. So it's a different symbol that comes in our scope. It's not like a correlated or something that's been acquired. It has a different symbol. I'm not going to get into the symbols right now, but it's a different symbol. And then we try to make contact. We go to different facilities that have radar maybe lower or higher and say, hey, you see anything over here? And then all we would do is tell the supervisors, and then just tell them this is what we have. But to answer your question, no, it was either an aircraft not on their right right frequency or right code, and would create a intruder alert.
Joe's sitting here thinking these two bozos asking me about UFOs.
No, hey, I got to ask the tough questions,
But the thing is, look at today's day right now. You got drones.
Right.
I mean, really, if you stare at them in my backyard, you look at them. It's like, is this a drone? What is this? Is this a helicopter? No, it's a aircraft on approach. But it's just weird how it, like you look at something, you could have 5 people look. It's almost like an accident, an aircraft accident. You could have 5 people looking at that same image, and they'll give you 5 different answers. Same thing with an aircraft accident. If you ask somebody, hey, what did you see? And they'll 5 people are going to give you 5 different answers.
Yeah. A lot of times that even happens with a car accident. It's 2 guys and a mic. My name is Jim Ryan. He is Mark Rizzo, our friend, and guest today is Joe Barberia, talking about his career as an air traffic controller for New York Center. I never realized. I thought, honestly, before I met Joe, I thought, the guys at the airport handled it all.
Exactly.
That's where everybody worked
at
as an air traffic controller, was at an airport.
Yep.
Didn't even know that. But anyway, like, subscribe. It costs nothing. And please follow. We're everywhere now. YouTube is where we originate, but we're on Spotify, Pandora, as well as Apple Podcasts. I think there's a couple more, Stitcher, a few other things. So you can find us pretty much anywhere, but it's 2 with the number 2. Anyway, Joe, why don't you tell us about, so you decide you want to be this through your father. What was the training? What did you have to do? And how long did that go?
I guess training in general, like if you ask any controller, training wasn't exactly the most, pleasant experience, but it was cool. So you first you had to take, a written test. It started out with like a written test, and then you had to score a certain percentage. Then they sent you to Oklahoma, and then you had to do more testing. And then it actually, the training has actually changed since I went and since they are now. It's gotten a little bit more user friendly. Like back then, it was a little bit more intense. And as it got to present day, it started getting a little bit more user friendly. But I would say my training was it was kind of stressful. And so when you went to Oklahoma, you did a pre-test. Then after that, you went home, and then you went back and you went for another, like, say, 4 months. And you learned everything about air traffic control, whether it be, the history of it, just basic airframe power plant, just basic aviation. And then they started teaching you simulated, traffic. and you would learn their map in Oklahoma. You'd have to draw all their maps, and that usually took about 4 months. And then if you successfully did that, then you went to the place that you wanted, or a place where you were needed. So I wanted and they needed me in New York, so I got very lucky. Other people could get sent to anywhere in the United States to work wherever they wanted you to.
Mhm.
And if you were going to go to a tower, your training was unmodified. If you went to a center, it was center orientated. So I was center. I went back to New York Center, and then I started training simulated traffic. Well, really, before you did that, you had to go and draw their maps of all of New York Center. It's like, do you remember those maps that we used to use for navigation and cause the hangstroms, the paper
Yeah.
maps?
Yeah.
We had to draw those basically, just to a certain area, like all the streets and stuff like that. It wasn't as crazy, but it was crazy. So we had to draw maps, and then after that, we did simulation, fake traffic with fake pilots, and we did that for a couple of months. I'm getting to the good part. I guess it's almost done. I'll make a long story longer. Then after that, if you proved that you did very well there, you went to real traffic. I'm having problems with my. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Seeing you.
Okay.
You still have the beard.
Up on my, sorry about that.
All right.
Okay. So then you went to live traffic, and that could take anywhere from 2 to 4. And naturally, I was such a superstar. It took me like 3.5, almost 4 years of live traffic. Each center usually had about 6 radar scopes, and each radar scope was like you got a what's it called again, a raise, so to speak. And once you got all 6, you were full performance air traffic controller. So it took me X amount of months and then 4 years of live traffic.
How many guys would be on a shift?
Well over 15.
Yeah.
Depending on the staffing now, I couldn't really tell you what the staffing is now, but you had 6 radar scopes. You had at least 6 people that could man the scopes. You had 6 people that were on break, 6 people that were working as an assistant or were on break.
Okay. And the shifts, what were the shifts? Were doing 8 hours, 10 hours?
8-hour shifts.
8 hours. Okay.
How many planes are flying after midnight? Is that what you said you would?
Well, there was after midnight. That was the thing. We went to a skeleton crew after that. It wasn't as many air traffic controllers as the day shift or the night shift. So you went to, I guess a minimum staffing, and we combined sectors. So it wasn't that many aircraft, but you did have like a FedEx, UPS push,
Sure.
like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and then it would mellow out, and then you'd have just sporadic.
I was going to say that had to be different. Like if you go to the West Coast, Mark, you've been in LAX. Sometimes the busiest time is 11 o'clock at night. I mean, there's planes going everywhere.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, you got the red eyes.
Yeah.
Plus, I would imagine on Christmas Eve, when you have Santa Claus and the reindeers flying around there, that probably messes up everything.
Thanksgiving is the
Travel day.
worst.
But if you work,
any holiday, your prices are going to go up, your delays are going to go up.
if you're working
How
midnight,
stressful is it? How stressful of a job is it? Because sounds like, if I have a bad day at work, a song doesn't get on the radio. If you have a bad day at work, I'm afraid to think. Is there checks and balances that if you miss something, somebody else
There's a
catches
lot
it?
of checks and balances. Believe me, thank goodness for my sake. But it does. There's a lot of like computer warnings that if aircraft are getting too close, there's somebody next to you most of the time that could say get another pair of eyes that could help you out.
how many planes would you be handling at one time? Like at the most?
Well, depending on I would say a good push is like 10 aircraft. 10 to 15 aircraft is a lot of aircraft, and just having steady that amount,
Yeah.
it'd be taxing. Stressful. As you start getting knowledge, the stress starts to like go away a little bit, but you still have you still have times of, because not every day is not this, there's different scenarios, and you could get tweaked every so often. But I say, as your experience gets better, your stress gets slightly less. I would say during training, the stress was at the peak.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? I got to tell you, the last couple of days, we keep losing internet, which is something we never used to have a problem with. I guess you got to pay the bill. I guess that's how it keeps the internet going.
You got to feed the gerbils too. They keep that electricity running.
That's very frustrating. And I was just bragging about how good Frontier was the other day, and I was recommending it against Spectrum, and now I'm getting dropped out every 3 hours. I'm sorry to drop out like that. I forgot what we were asking. I think we were talking about stressful and people.
Yeah.
And the precautions and the stuff that's involved there. But
that movie, I think I asked you this question before, Joe, but you could explain to Mark, that movie Pushing Tin. Remember that movie? John Cusack?
I thought it was funny. I mean, but
okay. What was that? Was that Center, New York Center?
No, that's Approach.
That was Approach. Okay.
There's about the same amount of approaches that there are centers. They underlie the centers, so there's going to be approximately the same amount. They handle about the same amount of territory, but they just have a different altitude.
So you work in midnights. I'll go back to that because I wanted to ask. Were you still on duty, or was it when the red eyes started showing up to come into New York, or did you guys switch out before those started popping up in the morning?
Well, what most people did was they got there a half hour early and got your relief briefing. So you start your relief briefing and talk about, the day, what happened, or what's going on in the last, whatever, couple of weather, everything. It's a checklist. So you go through a checklist, and you give as best relief as you can.
Well, were you like firemen and policemen where you had to rotate through the different shifts, or did you stay steady on one shift?
I kind of lost train of thought what we were saying there, but no, we would have a set amount of people there, and then we'd open up a certain amount of sectors depending on the day, depending on the staffing, and depending on, if it was going to be a busy part of the day. So you would if you knew the specific sector was going to get busy, you would have somebody definitely on the side, next to you as an assistant to help you out through your operation. And then it was up to you. Well, we had breaks. So, the people that are on break, they took a 20-minute break. They come back, see how you're doing. And, the supervisor was there to monitor to see if you needed help. If for some reason, if they needed help now, and they needed more staffing, they just go to the intercom. The people are a couple of feet away, and they just come and help out or relieve the person that needs a break.
Well, you didn't always work the same shift. Like you did midnight on 9/11, but was that always your shift, or did you guys rotate like police officers and stuff?
Well, it was just when I first started, it was like the police officers. You went like a week of days, a week of mids, a week of days. Week of days, week of nights, week of days, week of nights, and then a week of mids. And that was like, it was taxing. I mean, I think that was a big portion of today.
Am I back? This is getting annoying now.
Well, what you missed was being tired, I guess, having the amount of shifts.
Because that gets hard. I mean, that's hard on the body to be constantly changing. It's not so much days and nights, but then all of a sudden you got to throw that overnight in there. That throws you off.
Well, if you work a week of days, a week of nights, a week of days, it's taxing. So they had sleep studies come in and check, how we're accepting these schedules, and they found out that police schedule and some of the schedules that they were coming up with wasn't good for the pattern. It wasn't good for your sleep. Your circadian clock was like all over the place. Like you couldn't. So they came up with this I'm not sure. It kind of was okay. It was like 2 night shifts, 2 day shifts, and a midnight shift, and it kind of helped out. Some people liked it. Some people liked steady nights. because you do stuff in a day shift. Like
Right.
day shift, you go to the store, nobody's there. People think that you're retired. You work at nights, but you're home all day.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy because you're right. It does mess with your body clock, and the last thing you want is a tired, overtired controller with passengers in the plane above you.
Well,
You guys got to be sharp.
welcome to today, because that's what's happening today. And it's not only, you're talking, the pilots are the same way. The pilots, controllers, they're understaffed. They're working more hours than they want to. I mean, I left there working 6 days a week, 10-hour days. And it's like, yeah, the overtime is really nice, but it's, after a while, it's like
Enough. Yeah.
I can't
it's
believe
taxing
I'm
and
turning
draining.
down overtime. It's like, shh,
But you have
I don't
enough.
really want to turn down overtime, but it's like
How many people quit?
a lot, and not necessarily quit. We call it like you aged out, but as it started getting really crazy, they were like, hey, listen, like we were forced out at 56. That's the way they wanted it. 56. That's the way they planned it. It's a young person's game. At 56, the unions, the management, they came up with an age. All right, fine. But as it started getting really bad and critical, they started asking people, hey, can you stay another year? And a lot of people did do that. But the time that I retired, like in 2000, 2020, a lot of people came in when I did. So it wasn't like quit. It was retired. So there was a lot of people that retired during my age group, because a lot of people came in during when I came in. But right now, and they can't recover, because trying to, between COVID and the numbers just went crazy low. And you couldn't teach anybody during COVID. How are you going to teach?
It seems it takes a long time to teach anyway to get the knack of this.
Oh, yeah. And then training went to a complete halt with COVID.
And then there was speculation. I mean, even just a few weeks ago with that crash in DC, that there wasn't enough controllers in the tower. Although I don't know if that was proven out to be true.
Well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But let's get to the numbers. Okay, so say it was one of those days that it wasn't busy. It was just one of those days, and the controller is capable of doing two positions at one time. Whether it was one of those busy days, really, really busy days, I don't know what the numbers were at the time. Excuse me, but that controller could have handled, multiple positions, and they do it today. Now they a regular center controller can handle the assistant controller, and they can handle two positions at once. So getting back to, was there enough people there? Maybe. They probably, was it the right staffing for the amount of traffic? Would you rather have an extra pair of eyes? I think there were. I think they call it the cab, but it's the tower. I think there were people in there that could have gave her like, hey, extra eyes. But
it seems crazy to me, and being a layperson completely, not understanding aviation or traffic control, getting a lot of good knowledge out of you today, and thank you again. But it seems to me, why are they having so many training military flights near a commercial airport that's really busy?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I've flown in and out of National a couple times, and that's a busy airport. It's like LaGuardia. It's very tight space. They don't have long runways there. And they do shut. Well, I don't think LaGuardia does, but I know after a certain time at night, you can't fly into Nashville because you're flying over densely populated neighborhoods and the airspace around the capital, let alone. So now you got military flights, and they're on different frequencies, and they're all very, very, very close together. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, that's not the only corridor that's an issue. You got the Hudson River. I mean, the Hudson River has been well known for, they call it the VFR corridor. It's, for people that go there, just they want to visualize their navigation. So they're just go through that corridor, be at a certain altitude. They don't have to talk to nobody. They just have to go at a low altitude, keep their eyes open and peeled outside and see if they could see. And then you'll have an aircraft going over 100 and change the opposite direction, and they're doing the same thing you're doing. They're sightseeing. And that Potomac area is the same crappy thing. That's going to change. Just like they changed a lot of the situations with the helicopters in Manhattan because they were like fireflies. They were all over the place, sightseeing here, sightseeing there, dropping off Mr. Millionaire over here. That corridor was crazy. So they did a lot of changes to the Hudson. Potomac is nothing different. The airport's there. It is there. Do they have to go up north and go up that corridor and use their training goggles up there or their night vision goggles there? No, they could have went somewhere else.
So here you are at New York Center. You're working. Planes coming in from Europe, let's say, just England, whatever, and you're gonna get them down to where you hand them off to approach. There are private aviator people who fly around Long Island. Everybody has seen small little planes. How do you keep them out of that airspace, or how is that done? They fly a lot lower than what you're dealing with.
Well, yeah. Fortunately, we just put it. When you're up in that altitude structure, like we're in the center, you're not really getting the weekend warrior, we call it, or the someone that just flies every so often. You're getting scheduled aircraft, and a lot of these pilots got thousands of hours. So the odds of you getting somebody that has really low time experience is rare. It's not saying it's unheard of, but it's rare. But as you get lower, you start getting into more like novice weekend pilots like me. Like when I fly right now, I'll go up and just to get current. I'll fly around, take a look at, maybe do a practice, couple approaches. But I'm low. I'm below 5,000 feet. I'm talking to approaches. I'm talking to towers. I'm not playing around what we call it the big boys or the big. You know what I mean? But
so where do you go? I mean, where do you go? Do you go to Naples Airport? Do you go to Page Field? Where do you do it around here?
Well, Immokalee has an airport there, so I'm going to start training there soon. Okay. But you do have Naples, which is a little bit of a truck for me. You do have a couple of airports. There's Page north of Fort Myers, but I'm trying to get a happy medium that I'm traveling less than 40 minutes to get to an airport to go cut holes in the sky. So.
So you stay completely away as you do that. Like, let's say you're flying from Immokalee, but you decide you want to fly over towards the beach and then fly back, but you stay completely away from RSW airspace, so you're not anywhere near bigger planes that are at lower altitudes on their way in or out.
Well, yeah, that's one thing I'm not going to do is just get in the plane and just say, head south or go wherever. I mean, there's so many towers. There's so many like small airports and like even regional Southwest, other little, airports that are kind of like controlled. You want to have an objective. I mean, even if it's cutting holes in the sky and saying, hey, look at your house down there. I want to know what tower I'm going to be encountering. Like, what's my plan or route? Even though I'm cutting holes in the sky, I still want to like plan it.
What's cutting holes in the sky? That's inside lingo for what? Cutting holes in the sky.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but just going sightseeing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Sorry.
That's okay. Totally get it. It's Two Guys and a Mic with the number 2. Please like, subscribe. It costs nothing. You'll find us on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, anywhere you get your podcasts. We are there. We're talking with Joe Barberia, a friend of mine here in Florida who's a longtime air traffic controller for New York Center, one of the busiest in the country. And I think I learned a lot here today, Mark. I mean, like I said, I thought the guys at the airport handled everything.
That's what I thought. I didn't know about where he was. But what he was saying, so where you were, like, did you get paid more than the guy that's in the tower?
Yeah, depending on the operations, like say Kennedy Tower, LaGuardia and Newark, their operations are way up there, so they're going to get paid a little bit higher than, like, say, I hate to do it, but Isla Tower,
Right. Gotcha.
because their numbers are not as high.
Smaller.
So
Right.
as you're getting higher in numbers, yes, you're getting paid more. New York Center gets paid more than, say, some of the centers down south.
So a guy who's working at ISLIP, is that his goal to move to Kennedy and then to
Oh
you?
yeah, yeah.
Or no?
And then you'll get a cost of living raise just living in New York.
Yeah.
It's
You should
which
get
is
a
nice.
you should get a construction bonus too. I was there last week. My God, that airport is a mess.
It's crazy.
It's a mess.
LaGuardia is getting better. I mean, Delta.
Yeah,
Actually,
LaGuardia.
LaGuardia is good. It's I think Jim was talking about Kennedy. I think Kennedy's going through changes now.
Kennedy's good. It was a traffic nightmare over there.
Wow.
Well, that's how you can appreciate, like, say, Florida roads and stuff like that. When you get when you get out of the airport and you start driving on these roads, it's like, when are they going to stop doing construction? I mean, don't get me wrong.
I think eventually Kennedy's going to be very nice when they get it done, but the way it looked when I saw it last week over by the JetBlue terminal, it was like, really, you can't even get a ride share there. You got to walk from Terminal 5 to Terminal 7.
Yeah, well, that's how LaGuardia was. That's how it was there when they were doing, that whole thing over at LaGuardia.
As far as, I just think navigating in the car is aggravating. Like, I found Kennedy. Like, if you were flying in Kennedy and you didn't mind taking the subway or the trains and all that,
it's easy.
You could just get right on the AirTran.
Yeah.
Just go to terminal. You could go to the rent-a-car. You don't have to do nothing. It's once you get on the streets of the Bell Parkway and the Sunset.
It's a mess.
Get me out of here.
It's
now,
nuts.
you wanted to work at the center level. Was that your get-go from or did you want to work at the tower? Like, how many runways does Kennedy have?
4, I believe. I'm not going to quote me off guard. I believe it's 4.
4. I thought I read somewhere that Chicago Air has like 8 or 9. It's crazy.
Chicago's got like 2 ground controllers. That's how big this place is.
Yeah.
Scary stuff.
Yeah,
That's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, they got if you go on one side of the ground of the airport, they'll switch it to another ground control. It's really weird.
Interesting.
But that's how big it is.
Yeah. And then it shocks me, a city the size of San Diego has 1 runway. 1. Yeah. They count it as 2 because did you know? I didn't know this, Mark, until I looked into it and I was getting ready for this, that each direction counts as a different runway. So you got 3R or 27L, which Joe probably knows what the hell those mean. I don't know what those designations mean, but
they're compass. Everything is related to the compass.
Okay.
Right. So if you're heading like north, right?
Right.
Like, that's 360 degrees north. Or you were heading, like, say you were going south, you would go 180 degrees from north, right? So that would be 180. You're heading 180, which is basically south.
But how do they come up with, like, it's 3L and 27R?
Well,
what is
3 is a number on the compass. It's 30. You're heading basically northeast, 30 degrees. They take out a couple of numbers, so it's 3, which is 30 degrees.
Okay. All right. And there had to be a rhyme or reason behind that.
Runway 6 would be 60, heading 60 degrees, which is basically heading east.
Okay.
He sounds like you really got to know what you're doing with he does.
Well, not really.
Unlike what you and I do, Jim. I guess you
No. He knows what that means, even though he didn't land and or have planes take off. But the ground control, the guy there at the airport's got to go, okay, Delta, whatever, head to runway 3L, but he might be sending someone to runway 27R if they're doing, like, I know at Newark, sometimes they have both. When it's busy, they have takeoffs going and landings going at the same time on 2 different runways because it's so busy. So,
well, that's the luxury of having, like, parallel runways,
right?
Or like even intersection, like LaGuardia Airport is. I would say it's pretty complex. They got 2 runways. They use 1 runway for departures and 1 runway for arrivals, and you really got to thread the needle when it comes to timing of when you could actually take off an aircraft when an aircraft is cleared for a landing. So you could do that as long as one airplane is not really as too close or made contact with the runway. So it gets complex, but having parallel runways makes it a little bit more easier to, like, maybe you have double departures going one way, double arrivals coming in the other way, which is a maximum efficiency airport. Kennedy does that.
I know LAX does that too. I've been on a plane flying into LAX and look out the window, and there's a plane almost even with us going the same direction. So they're landing on one runway and we landed on a different one, both, at the same time. So yeah, that is a little crazy. How much training did you have to keep going every year? Did you have a certain amount of hours you had to do?
For air traffic?
Yeah. Like constant update training?
Always. It was, if every day was always a read initial. Every day. There was something being modified, revised, totally changed. So every day you couldn't sit at a sector until you did a read initial. So you read it, you initialed it.
Two guys and a mic. We are talking with Joe Barberia, a longtime air traffic controller, worked at New York Center. It's very interesting, very enlightening about your career and how you got started and the training. And like I said, we've learned some things that we didn't even know. I didn't realize there was that many levels to air traffic and air traffic control. It's pretty cool. So you had any questions for us, Joe? I mean, we're a couple of music guys that have been in radio or records forever. So we've learned about your business.
I just like listening to you. I really do. And I usually talk your ear off at the golf course as far as your different types of music, which I really find it's good because, you talk to, you hang out with somebody and they got this certain type of music or genres that you listen to. But I listen to you. You have a very broad, as far as music is concerned, which I like. I like tweaking people and put music on when we play golf. But
yeah, I'll say hi to him on the air, Mark, and I'll say Joey B from Estero, Joey Bag of Donuts, and he knows.
By the way, the
Mark looks frozen
Magic
again.
Kingdom doesn't have a light on it.
It doesn't have a light? No, I think I told you that.
It's only 189 feet.
That's why they kept it just low enough to keep from having to put a light up there.
200 feet.
Yeah, I lost my partner. He's got internet issues. Two guys and a mic. It's Jim Ryan along with Mark Rizzo when he pays the gerbils to get the internet running. And we're here with Joe Barberia, who's a longtime air traffic controller. Like and subscribe. Find us on YouTube. That's where we originate, but we're everywhere. But you get a podcast, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, and Amazon. Anybody who's got a podcast, you're finding it. Stitcher, we're there. Joe, can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Oh, I appreciate it. It was a pleasure being here.
I think we lost Mark completely.
Air traffic, let me end on this, is the safest. Even though you're hearing all these stories about staffing and all that, it's still they're professionals. They're doing the best they can. And it's...
well, they say it's a lot safer than driving a car.
More likely to get into an accident or a death in a car than you are in an aircraft.
Yeah. So, interesting stuff. Oh, there's Mark calling on the phone. So I think... hold on a second. Are you telling me you can't re-hook up now? All right, Joe, he says thank you. Thank you for being here. Technically, he's got to go figure out how to pay the gerbils to keep things running. He can land planes, but he can't get in through them. So. All right, talk to you later.
We'll get into that on the next one.
Yeah, next one. So, Joe, thanks again for being here, sharing some stuff about your career as a air traffic controller. We learned some good stuff here today.
Well, thanks for having me.